Alright, we are continuing with the 3.2 Aplia assignments with Strawman. This is what I want to talk about because this is sometimes one of the more difficult fallacies to pick out. And I think the first passage here they give us is a really good one to use as an example. The strawman fallacy is a case where we take the argument that somebody else makes and we represent it in this way that makes it seem weaker than it actually is. Or we ascribe to someone an argument that they're not actually making based on what they've said. And so the problem is this is all too easy to do in the society in which we live, in which people often engage in this debate-style argument over social media. And the concern in those cases is usually with winning rather than making a valid and sound or strong and cogent argument. And then what happens is we tend to then take the arguments that our opponents make and give them the worst possible reasoning they have, because then it's really easy to show that they've made a bad argument and that we've won. That's what we should try to avoid. We should be charitable in our interpretation of other people's arguments so that we don't make this error of giving them a view that they don't actually hold. And that's how we avoid that strawman fallacy. The strawman fallacy is a case where I take the argument that somebody else commits and I make it so weak to really easily defeat it, when in fact it's not as weak as I've made it seem. So I want to take a look at this first passage they give us, because this is a tricky one and it's good to sort of use this one as an example. Here we've got Mr. Smith and Mr. Wesson insist that a citizen's right to bear arms should remain an inviolable liberty. Okay. But studies have shown that countries with strict gun regulations have significantly fewer instances of gun violence and violent crime in general. Okay. So if Mr. Smith and Mr. Wesson mean to suggest that we should refuse all restrictions on gun ownerships, then they are simply wrong. All right. So this was a problem one for me. And the problem I see here is that even though I'm even though I chose the right ones in this case, it's kind of weird that it says 0 points. Okay. That aside, even though I chose the right case here, this is one where I could see it going either way. It would be a good one if you answered this in a different way. If you gave me your own reasoning, I would probably count that. Would use this one as one to say, yeah, you could get points for going the other direction in this case. Here's why. What Mr. Smith and Mr. Wesson say when they say a citizen's right to bear arms should remain an inviolable liberty is probably not that there should be no restrictions whatsoever on gun ownership. When they say inviolable liberty, okay, should I take that to mean that it means that they should never do anything to restrict gun ownership? Well, what does it mean to be inviolable? Inviolable means that it shouldn't be violated. And when I think about that in the context of the U.S. Constitution and our laws, when we talk about certain inviolable liberties like right to life, right to whatever, we don't really mean, oh, that means there can be no restrictions on them, even though we sometimes say it that way. What we mean is there should be no unreasonable restrictions on them. And here, that's what I suspect Mr. Smith and Mr. Wesson mean. When they suggest a citizen's right to bear arms should remain an inviolable liberty, it's not that they think anybody and everybody should be able to buy a gun, like children that are citizens should be able to own guns, or that someone who's a convicted murderer should just be able to go out and buy a gun, that sort of stuff. They probably mean, in the average case, citizens ought to be able to own guns to some degree, and that it shouldn't be something that the government takes too much effort to police or to police with policies. Okay. The conclusion of the argument suggests that they were thinking really that it was all gun ownership all the time and that we shouldn't have any restrictions on them whatsoever. Okay. Now, I think that's the sort of move that you should generally try to avoid. You should not, even in this case, say, look, if this is what you were thinking, you were wrong, because then it makes it look like that was what they suggested. And here, I don't think I have any good reason to think that's what they were actually suggesting. So this is a kind of sneaky move of suggesting, and I'm doing it nicely in this case, if this is what you thought, then you were wrong. Okay? But I don't think there's any reason to think that's what they were actually thinking. So I've suggested these people hold this really ridiculous view, and I've done it in the sense if this is what you were saying, then you were wrong, leaving open the possibility that's what they weren't saying. But this isn't something I should do generally. This is kind of like gaslighting. I'm suggesting that this person has this really goofball view when there's really no evidence to think that they are at all. Making them perhaps doubt their own reasoning ability if they're like, oh, is that what I was actually saying? No, they weren't. I don't have any reason to think that unless I'm being really uncharitable with their argument. So that's a mistake. I think, if we're doing that in our everyday reasoning. However, I'm anticipating the program didn't have that level of sensitivity built into it. And so when they see this, they're going to say, hey, this isn't a straw man because they did this nice thing here where they said, oh, if this is what they suggested, then they're wrong. Right? Here's how this would have definitely been a straw man in the program's eyes. So Mr. Smith and Mr. Wesson are suggesting that we should refuse all gun ownership. They're definitely wrong. That would have been the straw man. I wasn't saying this is what they might have been, and if they were wrong. I'm saying this is definitely what they were thinking, and therefore they're definitely wrong. That's when I put that argument on them. And that's really the hallmark of the straw man fallacy, is that I'm giving that argument to them, not saying hypothetically this is what they could have been thinking, and if that was the case they were wrong, but no, this is what they were thinking, and they were wrong. This is why they would count it this way, but I want to suggest that if you were thinking, well, I don't think I've got any reason to think this is what they were actually claiming, if I'm being charitable, and so this would also be a straw man, that's an explanation I would have taken as a reason to say, okay, if that's what you chose, and it spit it back wrong at you, we'll take that. We'll count that as points if you can give me your reasoning there. Okay, so let's move forward with some of these that I didn't answer. I'll do at least another one of these to see how it will go. Let's look at D, because maybe this goes further. Mr. Smith and Mr. Wesson insisted a citizen's right to bear arms should remain a viable liberty. Okay, so just like that one we saw earlier. But if they think we are just going to stand by and let criminals flood our streets with guns, then they've got another thing coming. We have a responsibility to our children, our society, and ourselves. See, this never happens. Accordingly, we have a responsibility to reject. All right. So I'm going to say that does commit a fallacy, and it should say yes, green thumbs up. All right, good. And the reason is that here I've gone further than that first claim. I'm now already giving them an argument. Like, okay, they think that a citizen's right to bear arms should remain a viable liberty, but if they think we're just going to stand by and let criminals flood our streets with guns, they've got another thing coming. Again, that's where I've gone too far, I think. Here they're saying, but if they think, it looks like, again, the if, they're just pushing it even further, though. We're going to stand by and let criminals flood our streets. So now it's even a worse suggestion that they want criminals to flood our streets with guns. And there I want to say, no, that's probably not what they're thinking. And so we have a responsibility to reject their position. This here, I think, has gone definitely too far. I'm going to say does commit the straw man fallacy, and we also give a thumbs up. So what's the subtle difference between this one and the first? Well, in the first case, why this doesn't commit a fallacy, even though it's very close, is that this, if they were saying this, then they would be wrong, isn't as far out of bounds. Even though I still think it is. This is a case where I could see going either way. And that here, this business where I'm saying, oh, this means that they think we should just flood our streets with guns by criminals, that's clearly gone too far. That's not a position that they're likely to hold, even if they believe this. And it's because it goes further, almost to a ridiculous degree, that the argument I've given them, that's why it does commit the straw man fallacy. Okay, let's go back. And they still give me 0. Oh. Okay, let's go back to the missing the point. Moving on then. So missing the point, as I mentioned in an earlier video, is the case where I have an argument where if I'm looking at the premises, it kind of seems like it should go one way. Like I say, oh, this is, all right, here's where we're going. But then out of nowhere, I get this different conclusion that it looks like somebody missed the point, like they missed where those premises should lead. Excuse me. So let's start with passage A. The article says that 43% of people who were involved in a car accident while speeding suffer life-threatening injuries. That's a good reason for police officers to strictly enforce speed limits on our highways. Okay, have they missed the point here? 40% of people who are involved in a car accident while speeding suffer life-threatening injuries. That's a good reason for them to strictly enforce. I want to say that's not a fallacy. Right, 43% of people who are involved in a car accident while speeding suffer life-threatening injuries. So, what's that stat tell me? If you're in a car accident while speeding, 43% of you are likely to suffer life-threatening injuries. And there are going to be other injuries it looks like are possible too, besides this 43. But nearly half of the people who are in car accidents while speeding suffer pretty terrible injuries. And that then is a good reason for police officers to strictly enforce it. So it doesn't commit a fallacy. That's good reason for thinking this. It's not perfect, but it's good enough. And so it does not commit missing the point. Let's move ahead. Heidegger was a card-carrying member of the Nazi Party, and even after the war, he never offered a convincing repudiation of its principles. Clearly, his philosophy should be rejected. All right, this is a good one to look at. This is not a missing the point fallacy, but it is a fallacy. I'm saying that because of somebody's past that they have really bad ideas, and sometimes referred to as the genetic fallacy, although they might in this case probably more generally classify this as the appeal to person. So I'm using a characteristic about somebody's personality or behavior or their past to say they have bad ideas. You might still have good ideas even if you're a pretty bad person, which is what I think we can say in the case of Heidegger. Bad guy for being a member of the Nazi Party, but he's got decent ideas in the philosophy, so we shouldn't just reject it for those reasons. Let's go to E. The guy on the radio is just a right-wing blowhard who was addicted to pills. Okay, that's also not going to be missing the point. Man, is there any one of these that looks like it's a clear missing the point? Bob was in tears when he heard that during the earthquake his parents' garage had collapsed and killed the family dog. Okay, good. He shouldn't be upset, though. I'm sure his parents have earthquake insurance, which will pay for rebuilding their garage. Perfect. All right. Let's say this is a clear missing the point fallacy. It's a case where, like, okay, this guy's really upset, right? Imagine you're on the phone with him, you're the insurance agent. He calls us like, man, or maybe not the insurance agent. He probably wouldn't call the insurance agent in this case. So imagine he's talking to a friend, right? You're his friend. And he's really broken up, and he says, look, my parents just called. We had an earthquake, the garage collapsed, and it killed Spot, our family dog who I had forever. I love that dog. And you're like, okay, yeah, man, but quit your crying, because, look, I know your parents had earthquake insurance. That'll pay for the garage. It's nothing to get too upset about. Clearly there, I've missed the point of what Bob is trying to get across to me. He was not upset because of the garage. He was upset because of the dog. And so my conclusion that he shouldn't be upset is missed that point and is therefore fallacious. Okay, let's see what we got here. Bingo, 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 and we're good there. All right.